Daniel had already decided that the day was going poorly before the medical scanner started screaming. He stood in the middle of the station infirmary with one sleeve rolled up, a thin line of dried blood on his forearm, and the unmistakable smell of industrial coolant clinging to his clothes. The injury itself was unimpressive, a glancing cut from a ruptured conduit panel, but station protocol had insisted on a full toxin screen. Protocol, Daniel had learned, rarely cared about inconvenience. Across from him, the nurse stared at the hovering display in silence. Sylveth had the posture of someone who had spent years perfecting calm. Her long ears, rising gracefully from either side of her head, usually lay relaxed and still, a subtle sign of professional composure among her people. Now they had angled forward without her noticing, the faintest twitch running through their tips. "That's odd," she said at last. Daniel smiled weakly. "If this is about my cholesterol, I swear I've been eating better. Mostly." Sylveth didn't answer. She reached out and tapped the air, pulling the scan closer, magnifying lines of alien symbols that pulsed in increasingly alarming shades of red. The scanner made a sharp chime, then another, then escalated into a shrill alert reserved for situations that usually involved evacuation orders and memorial plaques. Daniel winced. "Is it supposed to do that?" "No," Silva said very calmly. "It is absolutely not supposed to do that." She waved a hand, silencing the alarm with practiced efficiency, though her ears flicked back in irritation, as much at the machine as at reality itself. The infirmary lights dimmed slightly, responding to the system's brief panic, then returned to normal. Daniel shifted his weight. "Look, if I'm radioactive, you can just say it. I've had a weird life." "You are not radioactive," she replied. "If you were, the scanner would be melting." "That's comforting." Sylveth inhaled slowly. Her species had a reputation for emotional restraint, and she clung to it now as she ran the test again. Fresh scan, same result. Worse, actually. The toxin markers didn't fade or destabilize the way contamination usually did. They sat there, neatly categorized, metabolized, as if Daniel's blood had filed them away for later use. She leaned closer to the display, her brow furrowing. "You were exposed to Vrax toxin." Daniel blinked. "Is that bad?" Her ears went rigid. "It is," she said, "universally fatal." "Oh," he considered that. "Define fatal." 40 known galactic species, Sylveth continued, voice clipped now, experience systemic collapse within 6 minutes of exposure. 3 more have slightly longer reactions, but only because their nervous systems shut down first. Daniel looked down at his arm. "Huh, that explains the headache." "That explains nothing," she snapped, then immediately softened her tone. "Apologies, that was unprofessional." "No, no," Daniel said quickly. "I get it. If someone told me I should be dead, I'd probably have an attitude too." Sylveth stared at him. He stood there breathing normally, pulse steady, skin warm. No tremors, no necrosis, no signs of the catastrophic cellular failure that should have been turning him into a medical tragedy. She checked his vitals again, just to be sure he hadn't quietly expired while she was distracted. "How long ago were you exposed?" she asked. Daniel scratched his chin. "Couple hours? Maybe 3. The conduit blew, sprayed some stuff everywhere. Smelled awful, like burnt metal and regret." Sylveth let out a sound that might have been a laugh if it weren't edged with disbelief. "You should have collapsed before you finished that sentence." "People say that about my jokes, too." She looked at him sharply, then, against her will, one corner of her mouth twitched. The moment passed quickly, replaced by focused concern. "This toxin does not weaken," she said. "It does not fade. It does not wait. And yet your blood has already broken it down." Daniel raised an eyebrow. "So you're saying I won?" "I am saying," she replied slowly, "that your immune system has done something no recorded biology can do." She brought up a comparative chart, overlaying Daniel's blood profile against archived data. The difference was absurd. Where other species showed chaotic collapse, his cells responded with adaptation, restructuring themselves with unsettling efficiency. Daniel leaned closer. "Is that good?" "It is impossible," Silva said. "Which is worse?" She stepped back. folding her arms, her ears angling outward as if trying to hear something beyond the room. Medical training told her to report this immediately. Ethical guidelines screamed for transparency. Corporate clauses whispered about proprietary discovery. And then there was the human in front of her, making an effort not to look scared by joking about his own mortality. "You said you were a colonist," she said carefully. "Yeah," Daniel replied. "Outer systems. Nothing fancy. Place doesn't even exist anymore, I think." Her eyes narrowed. "Do you remember your childhood?" He hesitated. "Bits. Not much before. I don't know. 10? Maybe younger. Hard to say." Sylveth felt a chill that had nothing to do with the infirmary's climate control. Somewhere in the sealed archives of medical history, a forgotten experiment stirred to life. She forced her expression back into neutrality and cleared the display. "For now," she said, "you are not leaving this medical bay." Daniel sighed. "I was really hoping for a sticker and a bandage." "You may still get a bandage," she replied dryly. "The sticker depends on whether the galaxy survives this week." He stared at her. She met his gaze, ears lifting slightly, eyes sharp with a mixture of curiosity and something dangerously close to concern. "I will need to run more tests," she said. "Many more." Daniel smiled faintly. "Sure. Just, if it turns out I'm secretly a disaster, maybe ease into it?" Sylveth allowed herself a small, humorless smile. "Daniel," she said, "you are already a disaster. You're just standing in it." Sylveth did not call security, Planetary Health Command, or the Emergency Ethics Board. Though each of those options hovered in her mind like blinking warnings, she refused to acknowledge. Instead, she sealed the medical bay doors with a casual flick of her wrist and told the station system she was performing a routine extended diagnostic. The system accepted this without question. Systems usually did. That, Sylveth thought, was one of the galaxy's more dangerous habits. Daniel noticed the door slide shut and raised an eyebrow. "So, extended means how extended? Like minutes, hours, or you live here now?" "That depends entirely on you," Sylveth replied, already pulling a secondary scanner from its cradle. It unfolded into a lattice of light, humming softly as it calibrated. "Try not to move, or do. It may not matter." Always reassuring when a medical professional says that. She pointed the scanner at his chest. Data bloomed in midair. Cellular activity, metabolic pathways, immune response graphs that twisted and rewrote themselves as if unsure which rules they were meant to follow. Sylveth felt her ears twitch again, irritation rising. Her species' ears were honest in ways faces were not, and she had learned early how much effort it took to lie with them. "This is not possible," she murmured. Daniel clasped his hands together. "You keep saying that, but here I am, existing, very aggressively. Your white cells are not just neutralizing foreign compounds," she said. "They are learning. Isn't that their job?" "Yes," she said sharply. "Over generations, not minutes." She expanded the timeline. The moment of exposure was clearly marked, a sharp spike of Vrax toxin flooding his system. Any other species chart would have ended shortly after in a dramatic drop in a very quiet room. Daniel's chart, on the other hand, showed chaos followed by organization. Cells restructured, signaling pathways rerouted, proteins folded into configurations she had never seen outside theoretical models. He watched her expression shift from professional detachment to something closer to awe. That look usually means either I'm special or I'm about to be dissected. Sylveth did not look away from the data. "It could be both." "Ah, great." She finally turned to face him. "Have you ever been seriously ill?" Daniel shrugged. "Once got a fever so bad I hallucinated a singing vending machine. Other than that, not really. That is statistically improbable for a human your age. I take vitamins." She stared at him. "Sometimes," he added. Sylveth let out a slow breath. Humor, she reminded herself. Humans used it as insulation against fear. She had read the papers, seen the videos, lived through enough interactions to know when to allow it and when to cut through it. "Sit," she said, gesturing to the diagnostic chair. Daniel obeyed, settling in as restraint slid into place, not locking him down, just close enough to remind him that escape would be inconvenient. Sylveth noticed his shoulders tense anyway. "I am not going to harm you," she said. "That's exactly what people say right before the harm," he replied, then paused. "No offense." "Some taken," she said dryly, and began drawing blood. The vial filled with a deep, unremarkable red. Sylveth fed it into the analyzer and watched as the machine hesitated. Actually hesitated. The processor lights flickered, recalibrating twice before proceeding. "Oh no," Daniel said. "Did I break it?" "The machine is questioning its life choices," Sylveth said. "I sympathize." She brought up Galactic Toxin databases, cross-referencing VRAX with Daniel's antibody markers. The results came back empty, not unknown. Empty, as if the system had no category for what it was seeing. Her ears flattened. "This pattern," she said slowly, "does not exist in any medical archive." Daniel tried to sound light. "First time for everything?" "This suggests intentional design." That wiped the smile off his face. "Design?" Sylveth nodded. "Natural evolution does not produce this degree of cross-species resistance. Even engineered immunities are narrow, focused. Yours is broad." She enlarged another panel, showing overlapping resistances. Fungal spores lethal to silicon-based life, neurotoxins that dissolved hive minds, viruses that rewrote DNA like malicious code. All of them marked as neutralized, some marked as repurposed. Daniel stared. "So what you're saying is—" "My body is rude." "Yes," Sylveth said. "Rude is an appropriate term." Silence stretched between them, filled only by the soft hum of machinery. Daniel broke it first. "If I ask you to be honest," he said, "how bad is this?" Sylveth considered lying. It would be easy. A soothing explanation, a mild sedative, a report filed later when she had distance. But she found herself unable to do it. "Very bad," she said, "and potentially very good." He snorted. "That's not comforting." "No," she agreed. "It is accurate." She tapped the console, pulling up restricted historical files. Most were redacted, their titles barely visible. Colonial Adaptive Trials, Multi-Species Exposure Initiative, Ethical Termination Orders. Daniel leaned forward as far as the restraints allowed. "You're doing that thing again." The serious silence. "Your biology resembles subjects from a program that officially never existed," Sylveth said. "That sounds expensive." "And criminal," he swallowed. "Am I in trouble?" Sylveth met his eyes. "Not yet." The station intercom chimed softly. An automated voice announced a system-wide medical bulletin about rising VRAX fatalities in the inner sectors. Casualties in the millions. Quarantines failing. Daniel glanced at the ceiling, then back at her. "That stuff you said should have killed me. That's killing them?" "Yes." "And my blood just shrugged?" "It did more than that," Sylveth said. "It adapted." He laughed once, short and humorless. "Of course it did." She stepped closer, lowering her voice. "If this is reported, you will be taken, studied. You will not be asked for consent. And if it's not, millions may die." Daniel leaned back in the chair, staring at nothing. "You doctors are really bad at offering easy choices." "I am a nurse," Sylveth corrected automatically, then paused. "But yes, we are." Another alert chimed, this one more subtle. Corporate interest pings, already probing the station network. Sylveth shut them down with a sharp gesture, her ears lifting in defiance. "For now," she said, "we continue testing. Quietly." Daniel exhaled. "I was hoping my biggest problem today would be stitches." Sylveth allowed herself a small smile. "It still might be, but the galaxy rarely limits itself to small problems." She looked at the blood sample glowing softly in the analyzer, at the impossible antibodies forming like answers to questions no one had meant to ask. Somewhere far beyond the station walls, people were dying, and sitting in her medical bay was a man who, by all logic, should have been one of them, cracking jokes instead. Sylveth did not sleep. She told the station she was on a double medical rotation, which was technically true, if one considered obsessive archive excavation a form of healthcare. The infirmary lights were dimmed to night cycle levels, casting the room in a soft blue glow. Daniel lay on the diagnostic bed with one arm draped over his eyes, pretending to rest, while very obviously listening to every sound she made. You know, he said, most people count ceiling panels to fall asleep. I count how many secrets you're uncovering about me per hour. Sylveth didn't look up from the archive interface hovering above her wrist. You are currently averaging 7. Is that good? No. She flicked through another sealed document. The station's systems protested with polite warnings about authorization levels. She ignored them. Her ears were angled forward, betraying focus so intense it bordered on irritation. Daniel shifted. So what terrifying bedtime story are we on now? The kind that ends with the footnotes being classified, she replied. She finally turned the display toward him. Dates scrolled past. Colony designations. Genetic baselines. Exposure schedules written in the sterile language of committees that never had to meet their test subjects. This colony, Sylveth said, was not meant to thrive. Daniel lowered his arm. That feels rude. It was designed to fail, she continued. Repeated exposure to toxins, pathogens, radiation profiles from incompatible environments. The goal was accelerated adaptive evolution. Human biology pushed until something either broke or changed. Daniel frowned. You're saying someone looked at humanity and said, not efficient enough. Let's microwave it. That is a depressingly accurate summary. He whistled softly. We really do have a talent for that. Sylveth scrolled further. Casualty projections, ethical objections logged and dismissed, a final entry stamped with heavy encryption, program termination, subject disposal authorized. Daniel stared at the words. Disposal, he said. That's a fun word. It is not meant to be, Sylveth replied quietly. She hesitated, then decrypted the last file. A list of survivors. Short. Very short. Most entries were marked with confirmed termination. One was simply labeled, escaped, status unknown. Daniel's name wasn't there. No names were. Just a designation. Subject 47H. She looked at him slowly. He gave a weak smile. I've always liked the number 47. Sounds heroic. Sylveth felt something tighten in her chest. You were a child. Yeah, he said. That tracks. I don't remember much before. Leaving, running, I think. Ships, noise. Someone telling me not to look back. His voice faltered. Then he cleared his throat. Guess I finally found out why I never get sick. Sylveth closed the archive with a sharp motion, as if shutting it could contain what it represented. You were not meant to survive, she said, and yet your immune system did not merely endure. It cataloged, learned, improved. Daniel stared at the ceiling again. So my body's a library. A living one, she said, of resistances no other species possesses. He let out a humorless laugh. Great. I'm rare. That's always gone well for people. The station hummed softly around them. Far away, engines adjusted for traffic. Somewhere closer, a maintenance drone bumped into a wall and apologized to no one. Sylveth moved closer to his bed. Daniel, she said, do you understand what this means? I'm guessing it's not congratulations, you win a medal. It means there are organizations that would claim ownership over you, she said. Not metaphorically, legally. Corporations that consider your blood a resource. Governments that would justify imprisonment as protection. And you, he said gently, are supposed to report me. Her ears flattened. Yes, he nodded slowly. Okay. Just wanted to make sure we were on the same moral cliff. She surprised herself by snorting. Humans have an odd way of describing existential dread. We practice. Silence settled again, heavier now. Sylveth broke it. There is something else, she said. Oh, good. She brought up another display, this one live. Vrak's exposure reports streamed in from multiple systems. The numbers climbed steadily. Your antibodies, and she said, could save them. Daniel's humor faded. All of them. Millions, she said. Possibly more. He swallowed. And the cost? You. He lay very still. So I disappear, and people die, or I stay, and I become a product. Yes. That's a terrible design flaw, he muttered. Universe really needs better writers. Silva studied him. You are still joking. If I stop, he said, I might panic. That is also documented human behavior. He glanced at her. You're being awfully calm for someone holding a moral bomb. My species expresses panic internally, she said. It corrodes more quietly. Daniel smiled faintly. I like that you're honest. She met his gaze. I have not decided what I will do. That's fair, he said. I haven't either, though running away does seem to be my brand. Sylveth considered the data again. The child who escaped, the man who adapted, the galaxy bleeding while debating ethics. There may be another option, she said slowly. Daniel perked up. I love when doctors say that. Usually it's right before experimental nonsense. She tilted her head. Nonsense has saved lives before? He grinned. You're officially my favorite alien nurse. Her ears twitched in what might have been embarrassment. Do not make this sentimental. It clouds judgment. Too late, he said. You looked at my file like I mattered. She didn't deny it. Outside the infirmary, the station drifted on, unaware that inside one quiet medical bay sat the remnants of a forgotten experiment and a choice that would not stay hidden for long. Daniel broke the silence one last time. Hey, Sylveth? Yes. If someone comes through that door to take me, she straightened. They will not do so easily. He smiled, tension easing just a fraction. Good. I hate being interrupted mid-existential crisis. Sylveth almost laughed. The first sign that secrecy was failing arrived in the form of a maintenance request that no one in the infirmary had submitted. Sylveth noticed it while pretending not to notice 3 separate encrypted pings brushing against the station's medical firewall like curious fingers. The request was mundane: air filtration, recalibration, but it was routed through a corporate health subsidiary that had no jurisdiction over this sector. She dismissed it. The system resubmitted it 6 seconds later. Daniel, seated on the edge of the diagnostic bed and attempting to peel adhesive sensors off his chest without actually pulling his skin with them, glanced over. That's the face you make when the universe is being subtle but bad at it. Someone is sniffing around my patient logs, Silva said. Ah, Daniel replied. I've never been sniffed before. Do I get a warning? You get several, she said, closing the interface with more force than necessary. Her ears angled backward, a telltale sign of irritation she no longer bothered to hide. Corporate medical divisions do not monitor routine poison exposure cases. Daniel held up a sensor triumphantly. I got it off without bleeding. If I die now, it'll be irony. You are not dying, she said automatically, then paused. At least not from anything simple. That's my comfort zone. She paced the room, long strides clipped and precise. They will escalate. Requests will become audits. Audits become intervention teams. Intervention, Daniel repeated. That's a friendly word. It is meant to sound that way. He leaned back on his hands. So what's the timeline? Minutes? Hours? Dramatic entrance with ominous music? Sylveth stopped pacing and looked at him. You joke when you are afraid. I joke when I'm awake, he said. Fear just improves the material. She allowed herself a brief exhale that might have been amusement. Then listen carefully. From this moment forward, you are not leaving this bay unless we choose the timing. Daniel nodded. House arrest, medical edition. I will falsify routine report, she continued. Minor injury, standard detox. You will remain technically boring. I've trained my whole life for that. Despite herself, she smiled, then sobered. They are not only interested in you, Daniel frowned. Oh, good. Collateral anxiety. Vrax fatalities are accelerating, Sylveth said. Entire stations are quarantined. Pharmaceutical conglomerates are racing each other toward a solution. When none appears, they will look for anomalies. And anomalies look like me, he said quietly. They look like profit, she corrected. A soft chime echoed through the infirmary. Incoming priority communication. Sylveth froze. The sender ID was masked, but the encryption signature was unmistakable. Private sector medical intelligence. Not a government. Worse. Daniel watched her ears stiffen. That's bad, isn't it? Yes. Like run now bad or hide under bed bad? Like pretend nothing is happening while everything happens bad. She accepted the transmission. A holographic emblem flickered to life in the air, Clean lines, calming colors, the visual language of trust. A voice followed, smooth and warm. Medical Officer Silveth, we hope we're not interrupting. You are, Silveth said evenly, but proceed. Daniel mouthed, wow, bold. We've detected irregular toxin metabolism data originating from your station, the voice continued. We'd like to assist. There is no irregularity, Silveth said. Your sensors are miscalibrated. A fascinating claim, the voice replied. One we'd love to explore in person. The emblem faded. The call ended. Daniel let out a long breath. Okay, that felt like a threat wrapped in a hug. They will arrive within the cycle, Silveth said. And you still haven't turned me in, he noted. Her ears angled outward, conflicted. No. Why? She hesitated. Because you are not a sample. He smiled softly. I was hoping you'd say that. She shot him a look. Do not be sentimental again. I make no promises. Hours passed under artificial night. Silveth worked constantly, scrambling identifiers, splitting data streams, hiding Daniel's most significant readings inside mundane noise. Daniel helped by doing exactly what she told him not to do, asking questions. So if my blood neutralizes toxins, he said at one point, does that mean I could drink poison? No. What about a little poison? No. Just a sip. She pointed a scanner at him. If you continue this line of inquiry, I will sedate you. He grinned. Worth it. Despite the tension, the work progressed. Antibody models stabilized. Preliminary synthesis routines began forming theoretical compounds, imperfect echoes of Daniel's biology, but promising. Then the station lights flickered. Silveth stiffened. Power reroute. That's normal, right? Daniel asked. No. The infirmary doors unlocked with a soft click. Silveth spun, fingers flying across her wrist interface. Too late. The override was external, polite, legal. Footsteps echoed in the corridor. Daniel stood. So this is where I dramatically escaped through a vent? There are no vents large enough, Silveth said. Disappointing architecture. 3 figures entered. 2 security escorts and a woman in pristine corporate white, her smile practiced to perfection. Officer Silveth, the woman said, we appreciate your cooperation. Silveth straightened. You have none. The woman's gaze slid to Daniel. Ah, the patient. Daniel waved. Hi, I'm boring. The woman smiled wider. We'll see. Before Silveth could respond, Daniel spoke again. Quick question. If I leave right now, will that be rude? The woman laughed lightly. Very. Silveth's ears flattened, then lifted in sudden resolve. He is under my care. Any removal requires formal authorization. The woman tilted her head. Which we have. Daniel looked between them. You know, for a galaxy-spanning civilization, we're really bad at asking consent. The woman's smile faltered, just slightly. Silveth took a step forward. You are not taking him. A beat of silence. Then alarms blared. Not emergency, not panic. Containment warnings from elsewhere on the station. Vrax outbreak. Fresh. Close. The woman cursed under her breath. Silveth didn't miss the moment. Your timing, she said coolly, is unfortunate. Daniel leaned closer to her and whispered, Is this the part where we improvise? Yes, she murmured. And hope. Outside the infirmary, chaos spread. Inside, a decision crystallized. Daniel straightened, fear giving way to something steadier. If they want me, he said quietly, they'll have to chase. Silveth met his eyes. Then we move now. Somewhere in the station, systems began to fail on purpose. They did not run in the dramatic way Daniel had always imagined fugitives did. There were no sirens chasing them down corridors. No blaster fire sizzling past their heads. Instead, they walked briskly, like 2 people late for an appointment they very much did not want to attend. Silveth moved with precise confidence, her long ears angled outward, tracking sounds beyond human range. Daniel followed half a step behind, trying not to look like someone whose value had just been recalculated by several trillion credits worth of corporate interest. This is either going very well, he whispered, or very badly. It is doing both, Sylveth replied without slowing. She guided them through a secondary medical corridor that most station personnel didn't know existed. The walls were unmarked, the lighting dimmer, the air humming with power conduits buried just beneath the surface. Daniel glanced around. I assume this wasn't on the official tour. No, Silva said. This passage exists for emergencies and mistakes. Comforting. Which one are we? Yes. They reached a junction where the corridor split. Sylveth paused, pulling up a star map overlay that only she could see. Her fingers moved quickly, rerouting access permissions, temporarily reassigning authority to herself under a rarely used clause that translated loosely to medical judgment under imminent ethical collapse. Daniel peered at her face. Is that a real thing? It is when no one has bothered to revoke it in 300 cycles. He smiled. Remind me to thank bureaucracy later. They slipped into a small laboratory module that hummed with standby power. Unlike the infirmary, this place was old. Outdated equipment, interfaces that required manual input, shielding design before corporate surveillance became omnipresent. Sylveth sealed the door. This time the lock sounded final. Daniel leaned against a counter and exhaled. Okay, I think that was my delayed panic. She glanced at him. Only now? I was multitasking earlier. She turned on the main console, its display flickering to life, with a slow, reluctant glow. They will regroup. The outbreak will force them to prioritize, but not for long. Daniel nodded. So this is the part where you tell me the plan. Sylveth hesitated. He noticed immediately. You don't have one. I have several, she corrected. None are ideal. That tracks. She brought up a three-dimensional model of his blood chemistry, the familiar, impossible patterns rotating in the air. Your antibodies can be synthesized. Daniel blinked. Like cloned? Replicated, she said, artificially, not perfectly, but enough to neutralize Vrax's toxin in other species. He straightened. Then why are we hiding? Because to do this properly, she said, I would need access to resources I do not have, and if I request them, they will know why. Daniel considered this. So we do it the hard way. Yes. And by hard, you mean illegal. Extremely, he grinned. I knew I liked you. Her ears twitched. Do not. She began configuring the equipment, jury-rigging connections, overriding safety interlocks that assumed users were sensible beings with long-term career plans. Daniel watched fascinated. So, he said casually, if we pull this off, I help save millions. Yes. And if we don't? You are captured, and I am reassigned to a position where I explain myself repeatedly to people who pretend not to understand. That sounds worse than prison. It is, she agreed. Daniel's smile faded. And me? You would not be consulted. Silence settled between them, thicker now. Daniel broke it softly. I could still run, he said. Disappear. Again. Sylveth stopped working. Slowly, she turned to face him. Yes, she said. You could. And people would keep dying. Yes. He nodded, just checking the math. She studied him, ears angled forward, searching his face for something. Fear, selfishness, resolve. She found all three. You are not obligated, she said. What was done to you was a crime. You owe no one your body. I know, he said, but I might owe them my blood. She stared at him. Humans are infuriating. We get that a lot. The console chimed, signaling readiness. The first synthesis protocol waited for confirmation. Sylveth hesitated again, this time with her hand hovering over the control. Once we begin, she said, there is no pretending this never happened. Daniel walked over and placed his hand beside hers, not touching, just close. I haven't pretended much lately. She looked at his hand, then at his face. You trust me? I probably shouldn't, he said, but here we are. She exhaled and initiated the sequence. The machine came alive, lights flaring, energy fields stabilizing around a tiny sample of his blood. Data streamed in chaotic beauty, equations rewriting themselves as if learning in real time. Daniel watched, awed. That's me doing that? That is you, Sylveth said, being impossible. A distant thud reverberated through the station hull. Another outbreak zone sealed. Another 100,000 lives hanging in balance. Sylveth's console flashed a warning. Unauthorized scan attempts. They were being searched for again. Daniel glanced at the door. We're running out of later, aren't we? Yes. He took a deep breath. Then let's not waste now. She looked at him, really looked at him. Not as a patient, not as a miracle, but as a person standing in the middle of a choice no one should have to make. You will be hunted, she said. If this works, he smiled crookedly. I've been practicing. The machine chimed again. Synthesis viable. Sylveth closed her eyes for a brief moment, then opened them, ears lifting in something like hope. Welcome, she said quietly, to the most unethical medical procedure I have ever performed. Daniel chuckled, nerves buzzing. I was hoping my legacy would be less experimental. Outside the lab, footsteps echoed again, closer this time. Inside, a cure took its first breath. Time stopped feeling linear sometime after the third synthesis cycle failed, and the fourth one worked just enough to be dangerous. Daniel had learned to recognize the sounds of the lab the way sailors learned wind. The low hum meant stability. The rising whine meant Sylveth was pushing something past its intended limit. The soft, clicking noise meant the equipment was thinking very hard about reporting them to someone important. This machine judges us, Daniel said, watching the console flicker. I can feel it. It is not judging, Sylveth replied without looking up. It is calculating risk. That's judging with numbers. She snorted before she could stop herself, then immediately pretended she hadn't. Her ears, however, twitched upward in betrayal. They had been awake far too long. Station cycles blurred together, marked only by emergency alerts from other sectors and the steady accumulation of empty nutrient packs in a corner. Daniel's blood samples sat suspended in containment fields, glowing faintly as the synthesis arrays tried to mimic what his body did naturally and effortlessly. Sylveth hated that part the most. Your immune system does not follow pathways, she muttered, adjusting parameters. It invents them. Daniel stretched, joints popping. I always suspected I was creative. You are biologically offensive. I'll put that on my resume. The first viable batch sat cooling in a crystalline vial, no larger than a finger. It wasn't perfect. It wouldn't last long. But simulations suggested it could neutralize Vrak's toxin long enough for standard treatments to take over. Enough to save lives. Not enough to make corporations stop wanting more. Sylveth leaned back against the console, rubbing her eyes. If we release this openly, they will trace it. Daniel nodded. If we don't, people keep dying. Yes. Still a terrible choice. Yes. He walked over and peered at the vial. You know, where I come from, we'd call that a miracle. Where you come from, she said softly. They tried to manufacture miracles. He didn't reply immediately, then lightly. They really should have asked for better consent forms. She smiled despite herself. They worked in bursts, adjust, test, fail, joke, repeat. Sylveth explained alien biochemistry in clipped, precise terms. Daniel translated it into metaphors involving locks, bad keys, and immune systems with trust issues. Somewhere in the middle, something shifted. The work stopped feeling like hiding and started feeling like building. An alert flashed red. Unauthorized breach. Sector 4. Sylveth straightened instantly. They're closing in. Daniel checked the synthesis progress. How much time? Minutes. Plenty, he said. I once procrastinated a marriage proposal longer than that. Her ears shot up. You were married? No, he said. That was the problem. She shook her head, then focused. We can't carry all the data with us. Daniel looked around the lab. Then we don't. He moved to the console and began rerouting outputs. Sylveth caught on instantly, fingers flying alongside his. They stripped identifiers, scrambled origins, packaged the synthesis protocol into fragments that could be distributed across public medical networks. Open source. Unownable. You realize, Sylveth said, this will make powerful enemies. Daniel smiled. I think I already did. The station rocked gently as another quarantine field deployed. The intercom crackled with evacuation orders in multiple languages. Sylveth sealed the vial and slipped it into a shielded container. This will get us through the next exposure zone. And after that, we improvise, she said. Daniel laughed softly. I'm sensing a theme. Footsteps echoed outside the lab. Voices. Orders being given. Sylveth's ears flattened. They are closer than I'd like. Daniel glanced around, then at her. Hey, before we run again. Yes? If this goes badly, thank you. She met his gaze. Do not say that as if you are leaving. I might, he said gently, but not without meaning it. She took a breath, steadying herself. You are not alone in this anymore. That seemed to surprise him more than anything else so far. They slipped out through a service hatch moments before security flooded the lab. The corridor beyond was dim, emergency lights casting long shadows. Daniel coughed as residual toxin from a nearby breach hit his system, then paused. Sylveth turned sharply. Are you? I'm fine, he said, waving it off. Just my body complaining about doing unpaid labor. She scanned him anyway. The toxin levels spiked, then vanished. She shook her head in disbelief. Every time. They moved through the station like ghosts, avoiding populated areas, following maintenance routes and forgotten schematics. Daniel cracked jokes to keep the fear from solidifying. Sylveth listened, occasionally correcting his science, occasionally laughing. At a junction overlooking a sealed habitat ring, they stopped. Below them, medics worked frantically as victims of Vrax's exposure were brought in. Sylveth clutched the container tighter. We can help them now. Daniel looked at the scene, jaw set. Then let's not wait for permission. They transmitted the first batch to the med team anonymously, along with just enough instructions to use it. Moments later, monitors stabilized. Panic eased, lives saved. Sylveth exhaled, something in her chest loosening. Daniel watched the numbers drop and smiled. Guess my body finally found its calling. You were never just running, she said quietly. You were surviving long enough to matter. He glanced at her. You make that sound intentional. Perhaps, she said, the universe is improvising too. Alarms flared again, this time closer. Daniel squared his shoulders. Ready to keep being a problem? Sylveth's ears lifted, resolve sharpening her features. Always. They disappeared into the station's underbelly as the first whispers of a cure began to spread. Fragmented, imperfect, unstoppable. And for the first time since the scanner had screamed, Daniel felt something like hope that didn't come with an expiration date. By the time the station officially acknowledged the existence of a cure, the cure no longer belonged to anyone. It spread the way ideas always did. Messy, fragmented, unstoppable. One med team shared it with another. A desperate doctor forwarded incomplete data to a rival station. Someone with more courage than sense mirrored the synthesis protocol on an open network before corporate lawyers could even agree on which threat template to use. Daniel watched the cascade from a borrowed observation deck, hands wrapped around a mug that claimed to be coffee but tasted more like regret. Outside the viewport, traffic thickened as evacuation ships rerouted, no longer fleeing blindly, but heading toward treatment hubs that now had a fighting chance. So, he said, staring at the scrolling numbers, I accidentally became public infrastructure. Sylveth stood beside him, arms folded, long ears relaxed for the first time in days. You are no longer unique. He glanced at her. That's good, right? It is excellent, she said. You are much harder to own when you are not scarce. He smiled, tension easing out of him in small, careful increments. Somewhere along the way, running had stopped being his first instinct. He noticed it only now, in the absence of panic. Behind them, the station hummed with controlled chaos. Corporate representatives argued with regulators. Regulators argued with reality. Emergency councils convened and dissolved just as quickly when it became clear that no single entity could claim credit or control. Sylveth's communicator chimed softly. She glanced at it, then ignored it. Is that another invitation to surrender politely? Daniel asked. Yes. Tell them I'm busy being unownable. She huffed a quiet laugh. I already did. They had reached an understanding without ever formally naming it. Sylveth would not turn him in. Daniel would not disappear without saying goodbye. The cure would continue to spread, imperfect but effective, refined by 1,000 hands rather than one laboratory. And the corporations, furious and frustrated, would have to settle for profit margins That did not include a human being. A med shuttle docked nearby. Daniel watched stretchers being unloaded, patients already showing signs of recovery. The sight settled something deep in his chest. I used to think surviving was enough, he said. Like if I just stayed ahead of whatever was chasing me, that counted as a life. Sylveth tilted her head. And now? Now it feels like standing still on purpose. She considered that. Growth, she said. Humans are prone to it under stress. Glad to be on brand. They walked together through the quieter sections of the station, past sealed labs and hastily repurposed treatment wards. No one stopped them. No one recognized them. Fame, it turned out, was avoidable if you didn't stay in one place long enough for it to stick. At a junction overlooking the docking ring, Sylveth slowed. I will be reassigned. Daniel stopped. That sounds ominous. It is a consequence, she said. I broke protocol, repeatedly. Are you in trouble? Yeah, she said frankly, but not the kind that ruins one's life. Merely the kind that changes it. He nodded. I'm good at that kind. She faced him fully now, ears lifting slightly, a gesture of sincerity among her people. I chose correctly. He swallowed. So did I. A pause stretched between them, not awkward, just full. Daniel realized he wasn't planning his next escape route. He wasn't scanning exits. He was present. That's new, he murmured. What is? Not feeling like I have to run. Silva studied him. You ran to survive. You stayed to matter. He smiled at that, softer than his usual grin. You're pretty good at this whole medical ethics thing. I am terrible at it, she replied. I am merely stubborn. They shared a quiet laugh. The final transmission arrived an hour later. An independent medical council, newly formed, hastily legitimized, requested Daniel's participation as a consultant. Voluntary, protected, anonymous if he preferred. He read the message twice, then once more, just to be sure it wasn't a trick. Well, he said, looks like the universe wants to collaborate. Sylveth's ears twitched. Will you accept? He considered it. The child who escaped, the man who hid, the person who now knew exactly why his body had always felt like it was waiting for something. Yes, he said, on my terms. Of course. They stood at the airlock where their paths would finally diverge. Hers toward a new posting, his toward a future that no longer required erasure. Hey, Daniel said, if you ever need someone who metabolizes disasters for a living, she smiled. I know where to find you. He hesitated, then offered a hand. She took it, her grip warm, steady. Thank you, he said, for seeing me as a person. She met his gaze. Thank you for choosing to stay. The airlock cycled. Sylveth stepped inside, giving him one last look. Ears lifted, expression resolute. Daniel watched the doors close, then turned back toward the station, toward the noise and the need, and the strange, fragile hope spreading faster than any toxin ever had. He took a deep breath. For the first time in his life, he wasn't running from what he was. He was standing in it.